Hi everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Recruitment Reality. I'm really excited to be joined by Justin, who I've known for, it must be three years now.
Yeah,
Based
something like
quite
that.
early quite early in the Willow existence. And did we sort of partner up? Really excited to have a chat with you about your organisation, which is a kind of a disruptive short distance delivery business, which I'm
Hmm.
sure you'll do a lot more justice of introducing than I would,
100%.
and how you have, I guess, again, like really worked hard on your recruitment process to be able to scale that in a very sort of low human touch way, but an incredibly efficient way for you as an organisation. So, without further ado, it'd be great, Justin, if you could just give us a quick intro to you and obviously to the business.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me along. I think we connect in 2022, right in the middle of the COVID era. So it was a lot of fun to set you guys up. I think at that time I was looking for a very specific tool need, and you guys ticked every single box. And I'll never forget my first question list and jumping on an email thread or call with you later one evening to get it running. So that was perfect. So a quick intro for myself. Justin, I'm one of the co-founders of Packaly. I'm essentially responsible for everything growth and product related, whether it goes from our client integrations, onboarding, towards our rider recruitment processing. Essentially everything tech-wise. Relatively small team, around 20, 25 FTEs at the moment. And we operate across 3 different countries, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And we operate a fleet of over, I think, 3,500 couriers at the moment on
Wow.
our platform. And they use our rider application, and they deliver parcels 100% sustainably in these cities. So about 125 cities at the moment. So we didn't magically just land up there. It's been quite some hard work to get there, and definitely also in trying to take this recruitment process, which when I started this company and started working on this part of our recruitment process, it was a high human touch point issue. You could think about just trying to onboard one single rider would take about 7 to 8 days. And there would be about 15 touch points, and every single one of those touch points needed a human intervention. Um, that didn't really seem like a great way to start scaling up to 3,500 active riders. And especially also not cross countries where you have different legal obligations and all these kind of actions. So this is
Mm.
kind of where this journey of recruitment started for us. And I think one of the funny things is it's not our business, but we have become a little bit good at it, or at least I like to believe we've become good at it, because it's been a necessity for us. Our core business is shipping parcels. That's where we
Mm.
spend the majority of our time and effort on, and doing that sustainably for our enterprise clients. And to be able to facilitate that, we need people to do that last leg of that journey for us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been where we come from and how we've started. And that's a little bit of the background story.
Yeah, I think because what's really interesting, because of the business that you've tried to, that you are building, and the premise of having it 100% sustainable, that basically means it's driven by somebody, fueling the last leg delivery, right? So without having the people, without having the 3,500 couriers, you wouldn't have a business. So
Mm,
whilst recruitment is not your core business, in order to expand, in order to be successful as a company, it is a core function within the business, right? So
yeah.
I'm intrigued, before we talk about that, sort of reducing down that 7 days, or was it 7 or 17 days?
Seven to 8 days.
Yeah,
Our shortest at the time was 7. I always like to measure it on shortest time frame.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
a pat on the back measurement.
yeah.
So before we get to that, what I'd like to know is actually, Just a little bit more about, from a recruitment perspective, again, like how do you go about engaging with the rider audience? So, like, how do you actually
Mm,
get these applications in?
mm,
A
mm,
lot of people talk about employer branding, and
mm.
you know, it's a really unique role to a lot of people. I know there's obviously other sort of alternative jobs in the gig
Mm.
economy that these people could be doing. So I think people would be really interested to hear how you actually get them in the door first, even
Yeah,
interested.
yeah, 100%. So I think there's in the rider courier market, and also maybe good to point out my two fellow co-founders, Axel and Adric, they both, when they were younger, used to be semi-pro cyclists in
Oh
Holland.
wow.
So they're like heavily into the cycle bicycle community. And Axel, one of my co-founders, he used to have a online bike shop, like a fixed gear bike shop. And the fixed gear bike is those bicycles that don't have brakes, but you have to like backpedal on.
Yeah,
So that's a really like niche kind of cycle experience.
yeah.
Um,
Truly
and
terrifying cycling experience.
yeah, I've never actually tried it myself yet. It's still on my bucket list to get done. But to actually like get on one of these bikes and cycle around, and because he had that like shop, and that's also how he actually came with the idea to start the company. He was interacting with a lot of like these fanatic bike couriers. And when I say the fanatic bike couriers, you can take like a New Yorker on a bike, you know, the one you see in the movie, chasing through traffic. Like that is the real hardcore bike courier kind of profile. And that's kind of where our branding kind of stemmed from, really from that street vibe, street courier vibe, being a cool hip kind of company from that perspective. And that's also where our branding and our recruitment for these riders actually really started. So I think when you look at the basics of what we do and what we offer our riders as a job, it's essentially the same as what a Uber Eats or a Deliveroo or a take a lot or take away would offer their riders. Essentially, it's a gig that you're going to cycle for, and you're going to get paid for that gig.
Mm.
We do some smarter things, and we try to make it better for them. But essentially, we are a hip, cool company that they can cycle for, and we offer that branding and that exposure and that community of riders that we have and that we interact with. Are these crazy guys with their fixed gear bikes going full throttle, and they're like against things like electric bicycles, right? They're like, no, we need to feel the pain. And you can see like how fast they cycle and do these leg distances, and they're like out competing these guys on electric bicycles. So that's kind of where our branding and our focus started. And we've always kind of expressed that in our different advertising channels. So we predominantly focus on peer-to-peer advertising. So we do a referral-based program to
Mm.
get, once we have a rider, to accommodate new riders. It's a relatively low cost way for us to get high value candidates coming in. And we do our traditional digital marketing channels, so like Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads based on search, and we have a whole remarketing based set campaign to trigger these guys once they've signed up or reach a page of ours, to essentially funnel into this big, massive automated funnel in which they dump in, and that's kind of how we get them in. So that's also kind of where it started, because we really started as a business to upscale during the COVID period. I think we launched in October 2019 our product. We just got live. We thought, you're going to launch a product and you're going to have 100 customers within a week. That wasn't the case, unfortunately. And we set that up. But once COVID hit, I mean, everything changed. All these stores were looking, all our clients were looking for alternative shipping partners, sustainable shipping partners, ones that could fulfill essentially the need to use their store stock and get it to their customers locally within cities. And we fitted on that perfectly. So when we started, we were only in Utrecht. And I don't know how well the digital marketing savvy people are, but in those first 4 or 5 months of COVID, digital ads were really cheap because every company
Hmm.
turned it off because they weren't
Hmm.
making money and they weren't needing it. So we were running ad campaigns and throwing money at it for
Yeah.
almost nothing. We were getting like cost per leads at less than €1 per lead, and these were active leads signing up to our platform. So that's how we kind of started this high volume recruitment journey, and that's always worked for us. A little bit later on, of course, these cost per leads kind of ballooned, like 10x, with some few entries into our market, so we have to adjust that a little bit. But the general consensus is we use digital marketing channels. We have this cool branding, or at least we like to think it's a cool branding, to target those top level bike couriers, and a referral based program for bike couriers on the streets to talk to their other fellow bike couriers and get them to work for us. So that kind of combination is how we brand. Yeah.
And on the peer-to-peer stuff, because I think that's that's something that a lot of companies would love to get right. What do you incentivize them on? Is it a referral for money? Is it a referral for jobs? Is it more of a refer your friend because you love it here? How do you actually sort of work that without giving away too many trade secrets, obviously?
I think when it really comes to our audience, right, the pay per gig rider, it comes down to money. So a two-sided referral based program is what we've used. So we give X amount of money to the rider that refers his friend, and they both get a reward instantaneously. Based on a certain metric hit. So we set that metric at, you have to have done at least 10 deliveries with us to become eligible. And once your friend has done 10 deliveries, then you guys both get your payout, because then you're a value add, right? Otherwise, you're just going to get people spamming these links all over the place. And you actually want them generating revenue on our platform and servicing our customers before we do a payout.
Of course, makes total sense. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, because again, you're not employing them, are you? It's it's a gig, so you can come and go as you please. So you could end up paying a lot for a lot of referrals that never actually did anything productive for you. So yeah. And what percentage of your riders would you say come through that sort of referral channel versus the sort of paid channels as such?
So I don't really have that number off the top of head, but I would say it's below 10%, but above 3 to 4%. It's a campaign that we've launched relatively late, and we had it on simple versions in the beginning. It was successful, but at some points you kind of want to turn it off, because there's that pivotal moment where your digital marketing ad cost, once it's lower than your referral cost, then you turn it off, and vice versa, right? So it's essentially also a strategy that we would implement based on how expensive or which kind of cities we're operating in for ad cost.
Yeah, that's again really good insight. That what you need is to have, I think a lot of recruiters, and I'm not saying all recruiters, but a lot of recruiters would just take a one mindset of, we've got a job, put it in the same place we always put it, and not going, actually we need to adapt based on cost of hire, i.e. cost of applicant, also the environment in which you're working in. Because if you're in a city like Amsterdam, I mean, referrals would surely just be like, everybody cycles everywhere. Biking is just a totally normal thing, so everybody refers everybody. I know 10 different people, super cheap, super easy, versus somewhere where it's a little more niche, maybe it's less accessible from a biking perspective, like London, for example, and you've got to really sort of get in there and find them. So it's a really interesting point.
That cost per hire element was for us quite pivotal. So of course, like you said, in Amsterdam or like the bigger cities, so I think even London, we can get a really good cost per lead or cost per hire. But once we go to these like really smaller cities on the outskirts, it's actually really difficult to get them, and that's where you really start to see this cost per hire start to balloon. So when you're going into these other niche fields or like niche geographies, it gets really expensive, and then you essentially want to, every lead that you capture, and if they can give you one more friend, then you've halved your cost per hire cost almost, right? I've had in some cities where like just getting one hire was costing me 500 euros versus a €5 claim in Amsterdam at some point. So
Mm.
you're really looking at this massive differentiation, but I could half that cost per hire instantly when he just referred one friend, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a 40 to almost 50% cost reduction,
Yeah.
just straight off on that. So those are the tactics where we would really start to utilize that to try to get that niche geography in our case to come out. Well,
Yeah. That's really interesting. So, switching gears slightly, talk to me about reducing the 7 day onboarding. So we've got these great candidates in, somebody's been referred, and now I've got to wait 7 days before I can actually do anything. And you and I both know in the gig economy, you know, the speed of getting somebody jobs is probably one of the most sort of important indicators as to how long that person's actually going to stay with you, and you know, work
100%.
alongside your organization, right?
Yeah, and I think also with the gig economy generally, and the gig type of workers, they generally it's part-time work for them. Not many of them created a career opportunity, but they normally see it as a way to like fill up a gap or spend some free time or do additional work. So they essentially take the first thing that they can grab, and the first one that's going to actually be putting money onto their account is the first kind of job that they want to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you would lose out to a competitor or to another gig job very quickly if your onboarding was slow. And that was really what we were getting back as feedback in the beginning. And that's also just because we didn't have resources, right? So when we started, we were like, okay, cool. We have to go through a couple of steps, get the general information, get the users' preference of how they want to work with us, their business information. We need to validate all these details. We need to make sure that the person themselves is actually the person that they're claiming to be. Identity verification. Then, of course, also setting up an agreement with them so that they are insured with us, that they can actually ride, that we are insured, they're insured. You have to get all these details into these long, complex contracts, and they have to sign it, which can also take a while for that to happen. And then you also, of course, want to have some kind of touch point that we're having now, right? Where you're on a camera and you're experiencing that person, making sure that they present themselves well, that they speak well, that they know the basics of how to deliver a parcel. Because at the end of the day, they are the face of the company, right? They're the person standing and knocking on your front door at 8 o'clock in the evening and handing you your parcel. So there needs to be a certain kind of representation there. And that's where Willow really made a big difference for us, because we used to do that all on call, right? So we were using apps like Calendly and stuff like that to schedule these calls. And I literally just had one person's job was to sit and do all these calls with all these riders. And we were even like, at some point I was considering hiring a second person to just do these interviews. And that person didn't really like the job either, because they were like, oh, all I'm doing all the time is sitting and talking to these people. So we would start putting people into group classes, and half the people wouldn't show up, but we didn't really get that one-on-one attention. And it was costing us a lot of money on HR to maintain this. So that's when we started actually looking for different solutions. And that's a little bit where we found you guys. Because a lot of the solutions in the market, I think we had quite a niche problem we were trying to solve. And that was really just this face-to-face interview vibe, and being able to process that asynchronously, with the rider leaving their video or leaving their response, and my team reviewing it. Because what I've seen is quite a lot of people leave their responses at like 10 o'clock at night, because that's kind of the time frame that they finish their other gig jobs or they're home, and now they're busy doing their recruitment stuff, right? So completely out of our operating office hours, but that's when most of them actually leave their responses. So having that asynchronous working really helped us.
Yeah. I mean, it's like over 50% of people do their willows globally outside of
Mm,
work hours. And that's
mm,
because, you know, part of what we're trying to enable is, rather than telling your boss that you're feeling ill so you go home for an interview, instead
mm,
just do it at a time that actually works, and then there's no loss of productivity for the employer, for the employee, or for the recruiter on the other side of the table. So I totally, we see that all the time. This huge benefit that people seem to be afraid of, which is an asynchronous conversation can happen anytime, and everybody does it. Everybody sends WhatsApps. WhatsApp is an asynchronous communication tool. All you're doing is you're doing it with video. Everybody sends an email, which is an asynchronous tool, believe it or not, right? So it's how companies need to evolve to give that level of flexibility, realizing that, you know what, it might be a bit strange to begin with, but actually the student who's just finished, their dissertation needs to find a new gig because their last one's finished or whatever. They don't want to have a specific time in somebody's calendar and spend an hour talking to somebody just to prove that they're real. It just doesn't work like that. So you obviously started 7 to 8 best case. What's that now reduced down to? How long does it take you to onboard
So my fastest organic sign up, the last time I measured it, I actually consciously looked at it, was about 6 months ago, and that was within 8 hours. So that's the person going from ad platform to signing up to filling in their details, everything being automated and validated, to them leaving their Willow video review. Then my team at the end of their day or beginning of their day processing that video, approving it.
Wow.
In this case. And then that person completing all the other steps that came after that to get ready. And that person signed up yesterday and was riding that like next morning, which was insane. Yeah.
I was just going to ask Justin, because I know this is a huge issue for a lot of companies in terms of that sort of onboarding, the post Willow element, the contracts, etc. What technology have you put in to help with the onboarding side of things? Like, is it your own? Is it proprietary? Is it, what have you done there? A bit of both.
Not really. I think what we essentially did is we found out like all the steps that we wanted to do to automate. So we actually decided to do like this agreement steps and ID verification. We use Onfido for, which is also a UK company, for a lot of the technical question complexities based on what the gigs they want to do, which cities they work in, stuff like that. We simply just use Typeform actually. And for like automated contract sending, PandaDoc. And before that we used Sign Request, which recently got bought over. But it's essentially just everything that you can repeat, you just automate. So things like the contract agreement, it's the same for all my riders. Only differences is their first name, their last name, their address, and the date, right? But the rest of the agreements is identical. So those kind of fields would just validate, populate, and send out. And that allowed us really to make that process super quick, and actually also remove all the my team's human need to interact with it at all. And then we really like the Willow video part in this flow, because it is that just simple check from a human perspective in our team of, hey, is this person, do we want them on our platform? Yes or no? And actually I don't, that's no longer done by like an HR person internally. It's actually done by the people that interact and talk to these couriers on a daily basis.
Amazing.
So actually by our support team. So they get exposure to like, oh, so this is the face to this courier's name, right? And they have that kind of interaction. And if they're speaking to a courier and something's wrong, they can also go back to Willow and see like, oh, this is this person. So that creates a kind of different kind of bond for them to interact with the couriers, which is otherwise just chat, right? So I think that's quite a special addition to it.
Yeah, again, like especially in your world, in what is, I'm not gonna. I mean, it's a niche problem, in terms of your recruitment. But I love the fact that you can kind of bypass quite a lot of just extra stuff, like having to hand over that person to the customer service team, and instead you can still see the person beyond the chat, right, without needing a sort of intermediary and looking at all of this kind of stuff. That's it's mega interesting, and the fact that you can obviously go back to it and reference it. And I did have one question, but it's completely escaped me. Just about in terms of like trial and error, like how
Mm.
long did it take you to kind of find and build this system that's now got you to a point of where you've gone from 7 days to 8 hours,
Mm.
fastest sort of onboarding time?
So I think, this has been also one of my personal hobby projects, right? So this has really been one of the projects that I've started and never let go within the company. So it's still kind of a little bit my baby. But I think we're on version 4 or 5 at the moment, and every
Mm,
single version that we go through is only about 6 to 9 months kind of cycle. And
hmm
even just 2 weeks ago, we pushed improvements. So constantly looking for, hey, what's this next little tweak that we can do to bring down the lead time or to incorporate user feedback to make it easier for them to go through. A lot of the items that we also do. So this is very much for us really important is to figure out the cost attribution for a hire. So also being able to track that through to see how far they get through the stages to be able to understand that,
mm,
okay, how much does each person that has done a Willow interview, how much has that person cost up until that point? So these are kind of the things that we've really been adding to is the cost attribution to get a deeper granularity into our flows to understand that. So this is a process that we're constantly improving, constantly trying to update. And also business needs has forced us to update this during the years, right?
mm,
When we started, we had different requirements set out to onboard people, and that's just changed over time. So different versions of our agreements, different versions of questions we need to ask, different Willow interviews itself that we constantly iterate on. We started with very big questions, long questions lists, and we went to very short ones, and
mm,
that I think increased our response rate by like 30 or 40% just off that.
mm, mm.
So all these kind of like micro tweaks that we constantly add to it. It's an ongoing process, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the interesting thing about what you just said is there's always a solution to these kind of problems, but you need to have somebody that's obsessed with it to a point of it.
Yeah.
When you're a founder and you say this is my hobby, what that means is you've become obsessed with optimizing this process and you enjoy doing it. And if you can find
Mm,
that person within your organization that becomes obsessed with something like this and can just
mm,
drive that through to efficiencies that you can then measure at every step of the process, and then you can incrementally still improve it, and that person's still obsessed with improving it. That can have a huge effect. Obviously, like you say, 7 days down to 8 hours. So um, that's really it's. I'm hoping that people listening to this are getting a lot out of it in terms of again the way that you've also just used different types of technology that are not like
mm.
big onerous systems, but they're
No.
having a dramatic effect on the business. Is there, just to round up, and look, really appreciate you coming on, Justin, and sharing some of this knowledge with us. In terms of advice that you might give to somebody who's maybe in a similar situation, but is within a
Mm,
recruiting team, right? So not
mm,
a founder of the business in your sort of unique position, but is in a recruiting team and finds themselves with a similar challenge. What advice would you maybe give to them about trying to overcome, let's say their time to hire is something similar, it's a similar sort of gig
mm,
economy. What advice would you give to
mm.
them?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the most generic advice ever, but I mean, start small. This massive automation flow wasn't just built in one go, right? It really started with, okay, what part of this flow is taking me the longest, and what is the most
Mm,
repeatable steps, right? And then tackle that, and then just achieve that. And once you've achieved that, then take a step back, look at your whole flow again, and go, right, what's the next one? And that's just the repeatable process of improvement. Is look at it. What's the most painful spot in this? Isolate, tackle that only, and then once that's done, step back again, see if it still works, and then repeat the process. And then before you know it, you've done 3 years and a countless amount of iterations, and you've reduced that time, right?
yeah.
But I think what happens to a lot of people is they look at the whole thing and they want to have everything changed now,
Mm,
and
mm,
that's often not achievable. So really just isolating and just tackling that one problem first, and then going back and doing it again is the only way to achieve it. So that would really be my core advice.
Yeah,
and it's a philosophy I try to apply in everything. Yeah.
And I think the thing about, again, specifically about that advice is that if you're Pandadocs is what, to start, 30 quid a month, to give it
Exactly.
a trial with something.
Yeah.
So you don't need an enterprise system that overcomes all of your problems in one go. You can use different systems that tie together that are all, compliant, all have great data security, all of this stuff, but they don't cost the world. And you can start small and then build it out from there into a bigger process.
So yeah, not to take it on too long, but that's why we landed up mostly with you guys, right? Because all of these like ATS systems were massive, and they had huge billing requirements. And I was like, and it's cost per hire, and I'm like, right, I need to find something I can employ and process 3,500 riders at least. And you're talking about like serious billing packages on a year basis. Like, oh no. And indeed that. So just, actually, because everyone gets sold on this fancy, massive thing, right? The bigger the tool, the harder it is to implement. Has always been my finding. And the smaller and more niche it is, and the single problem it solves, the easier it is to work with, the easier it is to get going, and the easier to get your return on investment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people fear the sort of manual pain that might come with, still doing the other parts. But actually, if the pain at the moment is all manual, and you can quickly and cheaply get rid of the most boring part, for example, the 10% that's taking 90% of the time in the process, and you're still doing the 90% that takes the 10%, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, look, Justin, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. If somebody, either a rider or, an enterprise client that's looking for last leg sustainable delivery service, how do people get in touch with you or the team?
Yeah, easiest, just find me via LinkedIn or go to our website, packaly.com, and chat to our support team, and they'll get you in contact with me. No problem.
Perfect. Well, look, I'll put Justin's LinkedIn in the show notes, etc. Obviously, there'll be a link to the website. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Been really, really good to have a chat with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Awesome to see where you guys are, and happy to be a part of this journey. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Cheers, Justin.